Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're back with another first look, this time at Tier 6 German aircraft carrier, Vesser. Now remember, everything you're going to see here is still a work in progress. These ships have just now come to the live server for a round of super testing. We're allowed to show you these things in port, talk over the stats, because all that data is publicly available. But I can't show you gameplay. Nobody can show you gameplay. All of that is still under wraps while Wargaming works out the kinks and figures out what they're going to do with these ships. So just keep that in mind. Everything you see is still subject to change. I gotta say, I was super excited when they announced this ship. I've said for years that this ship would make a great Tier 6 carrier, and here we are. I have to admit, I didn't even know this design existed until I was working on the page for Admiral Hipper over on the World of Warships wiki, and in my research, I learned that this was actually a planned conversion for Seydlitz that was later canceled. One more note before we get too far. I've said this in other videos, but it's worth reiterating here. In my opinion, Tier 6 is where you're really able to dig in and learn how carriers work. Tier 4, with all the little ships with little to no anti-aircraft and the protected matchmaking, is simply not representative of what you're going to find in the rest of the game when you're playing an aircraft carrier. Tier 6 is way more real in this regard, and so if you're really interested in learning German carriers, Vesser is the place that I would recommend doing so, and that's before we even look at anything. Like, if you want to learn German carriers, this is the ship you want to focus on. Okay? All right, so let's look this thing over. Let's see what we're at, what we got. So, Vesser is based on the hull of a Hipper-class cruiser, so this 41,000 hit points makes perfect sense and fits right in with the rest of the line. Like most of the other Tier 6 carriers are in this ballpark, right? As does her 32 knots of top speed. This is literally the historical top speed of the Hippers. The hailing characteristics you see there, the turning circle, the rudder shift time, these are worse than Hipper. But I mean, come on, look at this thing. I mean, look at the freeboard and the way it handles. Like, it's not going to handle. This is not a cruiser. She's no longer svelte anymore, right? We've passed that point. That shouldn't surprise you. Detection-wise, right here, Vesser is still behind Ryujo, but ahead of everyone else in the tier, just like Rhein was at Tier 4. So that's nice. It gives captains a little more flexibility with their hull positioning in live games. You have the ability to maybe sneak a little closer to the front lines than you would in something like a Ranger that is spotted from orbit. Armor-wise, being based on Hipper's hull, there's a lot to like here. She has an 80mm belt, right? I mean, actually, let me turn off the torpedo protection. There we go. So she has this 80mm belt, which is not as good as Hipper's, of course, but that's still not terrible. That's certainly to sneeze at. She does have this 40mm bow strake. This ordinarily, like, you don't want to find yourself in a gunfight with this thing, but I mean, you've got some armor that if you end up in one, you can probably take a few hits and not be so bad off. I will say, before you ask, yes, she does retain the turtleback citadel here that Hipper has in the tech tree, so that is still here. Just like you would expect, right? Speaking of guns, she packs more of these twin 105mm turrets than Rhein does, but this ain't Graf Zeppelin, guys. Don't go courting any secondary duels. Like, it's just you're not gonna win any secondary duels. This is another. If you get a kill out of these things, it's a bonus. You just don't expect much. Okay. Anti-aircraft wise, Vesser's anti-aircraft defenses are pretty pedestrian for the tier. You know, Rhein was really good. Vesser is more mediocre. She's better than Ryujo, but basically worse than everybody else. Her mid-range ore, in my mind, is really the disappointing bit. German ships in general across the board in this game tend to have really good mid-range aura, largely based on these 37mm flat guns. But Vesser she doesn't have that. So it's kind of, in my mind, her AA suite is a little disappointing. Right, so let's take a look at the Strike Wing. Remember that all we have to go on right now is raw numbers, all these things. You know, I said this before, I'm going to say it in all the videos. Everything we really need to know to understand, to really classify these planes, the reticle size, the attack run time, all these kinds of things we don't know, right? So all we're looking at right now is raw numbers. All we can just talk about is raw numbers, and that things change in the real world when you get past the actual numbers. So there's some things that we can talk about, but a lot of this is just theorycraft. So let's look at these attack planes. We know this with Rhein. It remains true here. German aircraft are basically just the least robust of anyone in the game. These Vesser's Messerschmitts are trailing behind even Ark Royal's down-tiered Blackburn Skuas in terms of health. They're quite fast. See, they're 150 knots. That's pretty comparable to Ranger's F4F Wildcats, but these are pretty fragile planes. They are the same AP rockets you find on Rhein. But although these salvos are bigger, you get eight rockets out of an attack run with these planes versus the 6 you get out of Rhein. And you also get an extra attack run out of the squadron because the planes now attack in pairs. You get 8 planes that attack in pairs instead of 6 planes that attack in triples. Ironically, and I'll say this down below when the table's up, the stats you see there for Tier 6 German Premium Erich Lowenhart are lifted straight out of the devlog where they announced that ship. So they're here for comparison, but don't expect them to hold, as that particular ship hasn't even gone through a round of internal testing. So they're there to look at, guys, but I wouldn't fixate on those. That's publicly available info. You're not getting anything fancy there. As with Rhein, there's a lot of light cruisers in the matchmaking brackets that Vesser is likely to get, so there's still ways to get good work out of these. We won't know more until we see targeting reticles and no penetration values, but the possibility exists to be able to get some good work out of these. We'll see. Moving on to the torpedo bombers. Hey, here's something that's going to shock you. Low plane health. Yep. Now, I will say here at least, Vesser beats out Ark Royal and isn't dead last. The gap in health between her planes and those of Ryujo is very, very small. The speed of these planes is more middle of the pack than Rhein's as well. She's still stuck with those same crazy slow torpedoes, though, 25 knots. In a tier where ships are starting to get more and more speed. Vesser is going to start seeing, Gneisenau and Scharnhorst and Dunkirk and ships that she's really going to struggle to land these torpedoes on. She might be able to get good work out of them against some of the American standards because they're stupidly slow, but I don't know. We're just going to have to see it. I'm not sold on this. I fear for this, honestly. I'm just not convinced this is going to be a thing. But we'll find out. And then lastly, the dive bombers. Now, as before, these remain AP bombs that will be best utilized against enemy capital ships and cruisers. But she's going to struggle even harder than Ryujo to land them due to that pathetically abysmal plane health. The bombs themselves also don't hit quite as hard as the Japanese versions, which feels terrible. I mean, you already have a harder time delivering these things to the target because your planes are weaker. They are fast, so they've got that going for them. But I mean, I don't know. I really hope the German bomb reticle is way better than what we have on Graf Zeppelin. The reticle for these bombs, as weak as these planes are, and the fact that these bombs don't hit as hard as Ryujo's, this targeting reticle needs to be really accurate. I don't know, but I really hope so. And especially since dive bombers in particular, German carriers in general hate flak. I mean, think about how little health these planes have, but then dive bombers in particular, they soak up more flak and more incoming A than any other type of offensive aircraft because of the way they have to make their attack runs. They don't make them down on the water, where the torpedo bombers will typically make them down below the level of incoming flak. Dive bombers, it's all up top. They're very high, and you're eating all the damage and all 3 AORs, and it's just painful. It's just painful. So I'm not sold on this. I'm actually really concerned about these because I have a hard enough time. When Ryujo's up tiered, I already have a hard enough time landing dive bombers through AORs, and these are going to be even harder to land because the planes are weaker. So I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes. But anyway, guys, there you go. Quick look at Vesser. Kind of talk through everything there. Hopefully, I have a lot of high hopes for this ship because I'm finding I'm really enjoying Tier 6 carrier. It's a very unique challenge in a different way than Tier 8 is. So I like that we're getting a new Tier 6 carriers coming to the game, and I'm just excited. Plus, it's another Hipper. I'm a Hipper fanboy. How can you not like this? Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Wash your hands. Be safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.